President Trump hosted a small business summit at the White House today to commemorate National Small Business Week. So joining us today to talk about this is the economist strategist, Dan Varroney. Thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be with you, Anna.
So we know the recent Small Business Summit today just emphasized tax cuts and deregulation as the primary engines for growth. Based on your research, which specific regulatory strangleholds do small business owners tell you are the most urgent to dismantle in 2026?
You know, let's look at it this way. I'm going to look at it a different way. So, for example, when you look at regulations, our regulations are designed for Apple Computer and General Motors. And on average, our small businesses employ 8 people. What I'm suggesting and what I suggested in my op-ed that was just published a few days ago on Real Clear Politics is that we ought to have scaled permitting and scaled regulations. Because if we do that, that will speed up the time by which small business owners will make business decisions, that they will make investments. What the president has done with the big, beautiful bill is enable 100% expensing for plants and equipment. What's holding small businesses back, what I've learned in my interviews with 36 small business owners, is that it's the cost of permitting, it's the cost of regulations. Those high costs is what's holding them back. That slows them down from hiring, it slows them down from investing, and it slows our economy down. So what I'm suggesting is something brand new, and that we have a scaled set of regulations for small businesses versus large businesses.
Was there anything that President Trump said during his summit earlier today that really stuck out to you?
I think his energy, his passion, and his optimism around small business. He's very committed to small business. President Trump is an entrepreneur. He once led a small business, now sits on top of an $8+ billion business empire because he's an entrepreneur and he knows what works. What the president is trying to do with the new big, beautiful law is really unleash more investment, more growth, more hiring. The fact that 2 of 3 new jobs, private sector jobs, come from small business is something that the president is keenly aware of. He wants small businesses to lead the way in what will be a dramatic economic recovery.
So you've argued that a small business-centered policy can restore consistent 3% plus economic growth. Do the administration's current trade and capital access policies align with the roadmap that you laid out in rethinking economic growth?
So I think to a very large degree they do. But let me talk about a couple of differences, a couple of things that they could do that will really make the difference, that will really energize growth and really grow the economy. So first would be clearly the scaled permitting and scaled regulations. The other is to lean heavily on community banks and private lenders to make the loans to the small businesses, not relying as much on the Small Business Administration. There's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of form filling out for small businesses. It can be far more streamlined as far as getting these loans by using community banks and also using private lenders. The other thing that the president has said today, and he said on Truth Social, and I agree with, is that interest rates need to be lower. When you look at interest rates today, a small business owner has got to pay 8 to 9% for a small business loan. What I'm suggesting is that if you've got lower loan rates, if they're paying 5 or 6%, and then if they have streamlined or scaled permitting and regulations, you're looking at unleashing a powerful economic growth dynamic that we haven't seen for decades.
With the Small Business Administration pushing for modernized capital access, how can the federal government ensure that those funds reach the innovators rather than just those established players?
Well, I think the best way for them to do that is to lean heavily on the community banks and the private lenders to make sure those dollars get out there. Because right now, look, let me just be really blunt about this. Every time you put the government in charge of a program, I don't know how well it's going to go. What we really want to do is we want to unleash private capital. We want private capital to invest.
Disagreement with Germany's chancellor is having a major impact on America's defense.
So with the we've seen rising fuel and commodity costs impacting small trucking and manufacturing firms recently. How should the administration balance the America First trade goals with the immediate need to lower overhead for small business owners?
So I think that's a great question. And here's how I think they are already doing that. I think they're doing that by giving tax advantages to these small businesses. When you look at 100% investment for, let's say, plants and equipment, that's something small businesses didn't have before. And that is just a huge opportunity for them. And the other thing that I would say is that right now, small businesses are highly incentivized to grow their businesses here in the United States. In addition, their suppliers are highly incentivized to locate either in the United States or near the United States. The administration is doing those things, and I think they're doing them very well.
So we've seen rising fuel costs and commodity costs impacting small trucking and manufacturing firms recently. How should the administration balance the one of the top three challenges that you identified is attracting and maintaining workers in an area of high competition from those big box giants. What policy levers are missing to help those small firms compete for talent?
So I think it really comes down to this. So there are two or three success stories that I'll share with you. There was a small business in Alabama that built a partnership, for example, with their local trade and technical schools and community colleges. And through that partnership, she created a pipeline of workers. Another small business in South Carolina, a manufacturing company actually, built a relationship with the community college and helped instruct them on the kinds of instruction that they could give. And in doing so, they also created a pipeline of workers. So those are two examples. The other example I would give is that it's imperative that the administration continue its focus and its investment in vocational and technical education. We need to create a pipeline of trained, skilled vocational and technical workers that will absolutely help small businesses now in the near term and in the long term.
The National Small Business Week Virtual Summit is heavily focused on AI and digital connectivity. Is the digital divide still a major barrier, do you think, for small businesses, or has the focus maybe shifted?
What's been interesting to me is that as we've looked at the CapEx numbers, the capital investment numbers, in the third and fourth quarter last year and the first quarter this year, small businesses have been making investments in AI and technology. It's really technology and AI is a force multiplier for small businesses. And in some of the research I did for my book, Rethinking Economic Growth, what I learned clearly and succinctly is that they're making those investments and it's helping those companies step up, move to the next level, help make them far more competitive and actually far more efficient than they are today.
You often mention that small businesses are the backbone of survival for America. In the current political climate, do you feel the distinction between pro-corporate and pro-small business is finally being understood by policymakers?
I think it absolutely is. And I think it is for the silly reason that, I don't think that people really paid attention to it before. And I think the reason why people are paying attention to it now is that people understand that job creation comes from small business. They understand that 50% of America's workforce comes from small business. That is huge. It's substantial. They understand that 45% of the U.S. economy comes from small business. When you put all that data together, policymakers and regulators are seeing as clear as day that if they pay closer attention, if they make these policy and regulatory and permitting changes, if they scale permitting and regulations, that they will achieve to investing in job creation and growth of small business and extended growth of the U.S. economy.
So as we celebrate National Small Business Week, what is the one bold action or reform that you believe could most drastically change the trajectory for local entrepreneurs by the end of the year?
I think it's this loudly and clearly, and I'd say it a million times if I could, scale permitting and regulations, do it immediately. And the second thing that I would say is I would make capital affordable and accessible for small businesses through private lenders and community banks.
All right, great conversation there with Dan Varroney. Thanks so much for your insight. We really appreciate it here on LiveNOW from Fox.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.